My wife wiped out our son's college fund and mocked me in front of her family. I couldn't breathe until my son said, "Dad, she forgot what you taught me." 2 days later, she collapsed screaming after she realized that. I've been married to Maura for over 20 years. We met when I was 27 and she was 24. She was just getting started as a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm in Richmond. I was working full-time as a contractor, fixing up kitchens, building additions, and occasionally managing whole house renovations. We met at a friend's cookout, hit it off, and fell into a rhythm pretty quickly. She was sharp, confident, and good with numbers. I liked that about her back then. We moved fast, bought a house in Chesterfield County, got married a year later, and had our son, Jonas, a couple of years after that. Our life together was built on a shared dream. Give our son the future we never had. Neither of us went to college. We both had to grind our way into stable careers. We wanted something different for Jonas: security, opportunity, the ability to start adulthood without financial chains. So we made a deal. Every month, no matter what, we'd each contribute to Jonas's college fund. We opened a 529 account, and I even started putting extra money aside in a separate savings account whenever a job paid more than expected. Maura handled most of the finances. I trusted her. She was good with spreadsheets and numbers, always reading books about investing and talking about compounding interest like it was gospel. But somewhere along the way, Maura started changing. It wasn't like she became a different person overnight. It was gradual, almost imperceptible. First, it was the small digs. Comments about how lucky I was to have a physically demanding job that didn't require a degree. Then, when she got promoted to senior analyst and started earning more than me, her attitude shifted. I started feeling less like a partner and more like a useful roommate. She'd make jokes at dinner about how I don't understand real investments and how I let her handle the grown-up stuff. I let it slide because I figured she was just stressed. The pandemic had shaken up her firm, and she was under a lot of pressure. But it got worse, especially after Jonas started applying to colleges. He got into Duke, his first choice. We were all thrilled. At least, I thought we were. But the moment I brought up transferring money from the 529 to lock in his spot, Maura deflected, said she was handling it, and told me not to worry. Something about her tone set off an alarm in my head. She was unusually dismissive, almost nervous. I gave it a few days, then logged into the account myself. I froze. There was less than $100 in the fund. All the money was gone. Every cent we'd saved over nearly 2 decades. I scrolled through the transaction history and saw 2 massive withdrawals. One 3 months ago, one 6 weeks ago. My stomach turned. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. "I needed it for an opportunity," she said, cool as anything. "What opportunity?" I asked. "A new investment, private, high yield, early entry." You wouldn't understand. That sentence hit me like a slap. Not just because she made the decision without me, but because of the smugness in her voice. The complete lack of remorse. She had gambled away our son's future and was proud of it. I told her she had to put the money back. She laughed. "You really don't get it. This is going to triple, maybe quadruple. Jonas can take out loans. That's what normal kids do." We didn't speak for a full day after that. Then, as if the betrayal wasn't enough, she decided to host a dinner for her family that weekend. I sat at the table, barely keeping it together, while her brother talked about his new rental properties and her sister joked about their kids' expensive private schools. Maura, glass of wine in hand, said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Calvin's upset because I made a smart move with the college fund." I told him, "Let me take care of it. But you know Calvin. He's great with a hammer, but numbers scare him." They all laughed. I felt humiliated. Small. I got up and left without saying a word. Slept at my friend Nolan's place that night. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and let me sit on his porch in silence. I couldn't shake the guilt. I felt like I had failed Jonas. The next morning, I went into his room to talk. I had rehearsed what to say, how to soften the blow, how to make him understand. But he just looked up at me, calm as ever, and said, "Dad, she forgot what you taught me." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He turned his laptop toward me. Jonas had created a secret savings account about a year ago. He said it started after he overheard Maura on the phone late one night, talking about finally making real money and doing things her way. He didn't understand everything at the time, but it made him nervous. So every time we added money to his 529, he transferred a percentage, just a little, here and there, to a private savings account under his name. He'd work part-time jobs, too, and funneled most of that money into it. I had no idea. He showed me the total balance, $112,384.21. It wasn't just a backup fund, it was a complete safeguard. I sat down, floored. I couldn't speak for a minute. "I just did what you always said," he shrugged. "Always keep something safe. Just in case." Maura had no idea. We decided not to tell her right away. Let her think she'd won. Jonas submitted his Duke deposit using his own account. I quietly began gathering documents for a divorce attorney. I hadn't felt clear-headed in months. Maybe years. Maura strutted around the house like nothing had happened. She bragged to her sister that her investment was already gaining traction. I started digging. Turns out she'd put our money into a crypto startup run by an old college friend. One of those pump-and-dump ventures dressed up in sleek branding and empty buzzwords. No SEC filings. No board. Just hype. And then it happened. 2 days after the deposit was confirmed, I handed Maura the divorce papers. She looked confused. "You're leaving over this?" "Yes," I said. "And Jonas is going to Duke." "With what money?" she asked, laughing. "Unless you robbed a bank." Jonas stepped into the room and handed her a printed bank statement. She stared at it, blinking. "What is this?" "My backup," Jonas said simply. "I didn't trust you." She looked at both of us like we had stabbed her in the chest. I turned and walked out. The silence was enough. Later that evening, I returned to grab some clothes. She was on the kitchen floor, clutching papers, foreclosure warnings, account freezes, letters from the IRS. The startup had gone belly up. She had poured in not just Jonas's fund, but our entire emergency savings, and even taken out a personal line of credit using forged paperwork. Everything was unraveling. She was screaming like she couldn't breathe. In the days that followed, the house felt like a war zone after the final battle. Quiet, still, with remnants of destruction in every corner. Financial papers strewn across the kitchen island, a half-packed suitcase in the hallway, bills unopened on the side table. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, the kind that rings in your ears when everything else goes quiet. I stayed with Nolan for a bit longer. He let me crash in his guest room, no questions asked, though his wife gave me that knowing look of sympathy every time I passed her in the hall. I appreciated the space. I needed time to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next, not just for me, but for Jonas. Jonas, somehow, stayed calm through it all. He was always like that, a thinker. Not cold, not detached, just observant. While I was caught in the emotional wreckage, he was already planning his move-in day, looking into work-study options at Duke, applying for housing, and handling orientation logistics like a seasoned adult. I kept waiting for him to break down. For the frustration, the betrayal, the sheer magnitude of what his mother had done to hit him. But it never came. One night, we sat on the back deck at Nolan's place. It was one of those sticky Virginia evenings where the air clings to your skin and the bugs don't give you a moment's peace. Jonas leaned back in the chair, watching the sky darken. "I'm not mad at her," he said quietly. I turned to him, startled. "You're not?" "No," he said. "Just disappointed. I expected better." That hit harder than any angry outburst ever could. I think that's what finally made it real for me. Not the screaming or the collapse or the bank statements. It was Jonas's quiet resignation. That kind of disappointment doesn't come from one event. It's layered, built over years of seeing cracks and giving the benefit of the doubt until there's nothing left to give. Meanwhile, Maura had gone from smug to scattered. She stopped going to work. Her firm had placed her on leave after internal auditors flagged suspicious activity in her personal accounts. Apparently, one of her junior colleagues had tipped off HR after overhearing a heated phone call she'd had with her crypto contact. I didn't know the full details, but I had a feeling her professional life was unraveling as quickly as her personal one. She tried calling me a few times, always from a blocked number. I didn't answer. I had nothing more to say. She left a couple of voicemails, her tone ranging from defensive to desperate. One of them started with, "You don't get it. This was going to set us up for life," and ended with, "I didn't mean to hurt Jonas." I didn't delete it. I didn't play it again either. It sat there, unplayed, like a monument to every moment I overlooked, every warning sign I rationalized. A week before Jonas's move-in date, I found a small 2-bedroom rental in Bon Air. Nothing fancy, but clean, with decent light, and just enough space for when Jonas came home for breaks. I took a drive over there one afternoon after signing the lease. The landlord handed me the keys and said, "Fresh start, huh?" I just nodded. That night, I stood in what would be Jonas's room. Bare walls, no furniture, just quiet. And I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Like something had been cut out of me, but in doing so, had made room for something better. Jonas and I moved in the following weekend. He insisted on carrying most of the boxes himself. We set up his bed, unpacked his books, and ordered greasy pizza from a place down the street that didn't skimp on toppings. We didn't talk about Maura much. It hung in the air, but neither of us felt the need to pick at the wound. He asked once, "Do you think she'll be okay?" I answered honestly, "I don't know." He nodded. That was the end of it. We were both tired of pretending things were okay when they weren't. A few days later, Jonas was off to Duke. I drove him down in the pickup. The campus was beautiful, sprawling, and green, full of nervous parents and eager students lugging suitcases and mini fridges across sidewalks. As we unloaded his stuff, I felt this unfamiliar tightness in my chest, part pride, part sadness, part disbelief that we had actually made it here. He hugged me before I left. "Thanks, Dad, for everything." It was such a simple phrase, but it held years of meaning. On the drive back, I kept thinking about how much one decision, one betrayal, had changed everything. Not just Mora's gamble, but my decision to let her take the lead all those years. To trust without verifying. To silence my instincts. But more than that, I thought about the way Jonas handled it. The way he protected himself, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. He didn't let her cynicism infect him. He remembered the lessons I taught him, even the ones I didn't know I was teaching. It reminded me of something my father once said to me, back when I was a teenager. You're not raising a child. You're raising a future man. I didn't understand it back then. I do now. We weren't finished yet. Mora still had to answer for the money. There were questions to be resolved, legal ones, financial ones. The divorce process would get messier before it got better. But something in me had shifted. Mora, predictably, didn't handle the silence well. The day after Jonas left for Duke, I got a message from her brother, Clint, someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year even before the fallout. The message was short, abrupt. Mora's not doing well. You should talk to her. I stared at the message for a long time before I deleted it. By then, she was living alone in the house. I had told the lawyer I wasn't interested in a drawn-out property fight. Let her keep it if it meant she'd stop dragging her heels in mediation. I knew from Nolan's contacts at the county office that the property taxes were past due and the second mortgage, something she'd taken out behind my back, was inching toward default. The house was no longer an asset. It was a bomb waiting to go off. She tried messaging Jonas, too. Sent him a long email with the subject line, "From your mother who loves you, no matter what your father says." He didn't even open it. Just forwarded it to me with a single line. Should I block her? I told him no. Don't block her. Let her talk. But you don't have to answer. That's something I've learned over time. Silence isn't just a lack of words. It's a choice. A powerful one. Sometimes not responding is the clearest response of all. The divorce proceedings dragged. Not because I was contesting anything, but because Mora kept flipping between states of manic confidence and complete collapse. One week she'd insist she had hired a new financial advisor to turn everything around, and the next, she'd show up to our lawyer's office without shoes, crying that no one understood what she sacrificed for this family. Our lawyer, Valerie, was patient but firm. A seasoned woman in her 60s, Valerie had seen it all. On more than one occasion, she muttered under her breath, "This is textbook narcissism, right here." Mora's claims kept getting wilder. She said I manipulated Jonas, that I brainwashed him, that I had been emotionally unavailable for years. She tried to claw back some of Jonas's savings, claiming marital contribution rights, but Jonas was smart. He had kept everything in an account under his name only, set up through a financial advisor that he chose, with my oversight but no control. There was nothing she could touch, and that drove her mad. I started getting anonymous calls, some hang-ups, some with muffled voices. One even said, "You don't deserve him." I figured they were Mora's doing. Maybe a friend of hers. Maybe her. I didn't care. But I did worry about Jonas. At Duke, he stayed focused. He joined the coding club, started attending early morning runs with a local training group, even picked up a part-time job at a campus IT center. He told me once over the phone, "I feel lighter here, Dad. Like I'm finally breathing normal air." I felt the same way. For years, I hadn't realized how much of my energy had been spent managing Mora's moods, tiptoeing around her ego, letting her carry the illusion of control because it kept the peace. I convinced myself I was being a good husband by giving her space to handle things. But in reality, I was enabling her. I was making her more dangerous to both of us. That's what betrayal really is. It's not always one big act. Sometimes it's thousands of small ones. Little shifts in trust, tiny adjustments in belief, until you look up and realize the person beside you isn't your partner anymore. They're a stranger. Worse, a saboteur. It wasn't just about the money. It was about control. The way she used knowledge like a weapon, finances as leverage, silence as punishment. But now, she was on her own. I learned from a mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to since the early years of our marriage, that Mora had been trying to get back into her old firm. But her reputation had followed her. The SEC had started an investigation into the crypto startup she backed. While she hadn't been charged yet, her name was mentioned in a public filing as a notable investor. That was enough to keep doors closed. At one point, she tried to apply for a consulting job under her maiden name. Didn't work. Burn enough bridges, and eventually, you run out of ways to cross the water. I wish I could say I felt satisfaction watching it all fall apart. But it wasn't that. Not really. It was more like watching the aftermath of a wildfire. I didn't celebrate the ashes. I just knew I'd survived the blaze. One evening, I was at the grocery store near my new place, picking up frozen meals and toilet paper when I saw her, Mora. She was thinner, her hair tied up messily, wearing sweatpants and a windbreaker. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Our eyes met in the refrigerated aisle. She stopped. I didn't. She called after me softly, "Calvin." I turned just enough to meet her gaze, but said nothing. She took a step forward. "Can we talk?" I thought about it, then shook my head. "No, Mora. We've said enough." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue. To explain. to unravel years of damage in a single conversation. But I turned and walked away. I didn't need closure. I had already found it. In Jonas, in the quiet mornings in my new apartment, in the space where peace had finally settled in after that encounter in the grocery store, things got quieter, at least on the surface. But that kind of quiet isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the calm between legal storms. Maura didn't try to contact me again directly after that day. I think seeing me not flinch, not engage, pulled the last bit of control away from her. I wasn't playing the part anymore. The tolerant husband, the fixer, the silent co-star in the drama she directed. I had rewritten my role and left the stage, and that unsettled her more than any argument ever could. Still, she wasn't done making things difficult. I found out through Valerie that Maura was contesting the terms of the divorce again. This time it wasn't about money or assets. It was about image. She filed a motion requesting that I remove defamatory claims from our legal statements. Specifically, my assertion that she had misappropriated Jonas's college fund without consent. Valerie laughed when she read it. She's trying to litigate her ego, she said. Not going to work. Maura's new angle was that she had intended to replace the money before Duke's tuition was due. That she had informed me of the plan. That her actions were strategic, not deceptive. This part really stuck with me. How desperate she was to shape the narrative. Even when everything was unraveling, she clung to this idea that if she just framed the story the right way, she could still come out ahead. But it wasn't a story anymore. It was real life. And she was out of edits. Meanwhile, Jonas thrived. I don't say that lightly. He adjusted to college better than I expected. He found his people, nerds and thinkers, kids from working-class families like ours who knew what it meant to earn your seat. He started tutoring freshmen in computer science. Not because he needed the money, but because he liked helping people get unstuck. That's how he put it. He'd call me once a week. Sometimes more. Sometimes less. We didn't always have deep conversations, just updates about classes, odd questions about cooking, can you make eggs without butter, random stories about his dorm neighbors. But there was a steadiness in his voice I hadn't heard before. One night, after a long week of contract work, I sat in my new place with a cold beer and scrolled through old photos. There was one of us from years ago, Jonas maybe 9 or 10, sitting on my lap in the garage, both of us covered in grease after fixing up an old dirt bike someone gave me. We looked happy, simple, grounded, messy in the best way. And I realized, even then, I had been raising a survivor, a thinker, a builder. I hadn't taught him to chase shortcuts. I taught him to work, to prepare, to stay aware, to protect what mattered. It struck me how far that lesson had carried him, and how much it had eluded Maura. For all her intelligence, all her ambition, she believed she was untouchable. That rules were for others. That consequences were optional if you played your cards right. But the house of cards was collapsing now, and no one was rushing in to save her. A few weeks later, I got a letter, not an email, not a text, but a real letter, in a plain white envelope, postmarked from Richmond. It was from Maura. The handwriting was rushed, not like her. She used to have perfect penmanship. The letter was short, just 3 paragraphs. No apologies. No admissions. It said, "You always wanted things simple. Maybe that's what worked for you. But I wanted more, Calvin. I needed more. You call it betrayal. I call it survival. One day, you'll understand that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just didn't want to stay small." There it was again, her core belief. That a stable life, an honest life, a decent life, was somehow small. That providing for your family the slow, steady way was a cage instead of a foundation. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who viewed your values as limitations. Around that time, I started reconnecting with myself again. The version of me that existed before the marriage became a power struggle. I took on a few weekend woodworking projects. Started volunteering with Habitat for Humanity. I wasn't trying to find myself. I was just getting reacquainted with the man I'd always been, underneath the years of second-guessing and emotional landmines. I even met someone. Nothing serious, not yet. Her name's May, a nurse I met during a community fundraiser. She's kind, grounded, the kind of person who listens without waiting for her turn to speak. We've gone on a few walks, had coffee. She asks about Jonas, about work, about how I'm sleeping, questions Maura never cared to ask, even when we were fine. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm not looking to fill a void. But it's been good to talk to someone who doesn't see vulnerability as weakness. Through it all, Jonas kept rising. His second semester at Duke came and went with strong grades and a quiet confidence. He came home for spring break, dropped his duffel bag at the door, and said, "Feels good to be here." Not feels good to be home. Just here. Present. Safe. Unburdened. We grilled steaks that night. Talked about nothing and everything. He asked if he should visit his mom. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I said, "If you want to go? If you don't, don't. You don't owe her anything except the truth." He nodded. Didn't say anything else about it. A week later, I got a text from him, visited her. Not much to say. She's not the same. I didn't press. I didn't need details. Some people change. Some people don't. And some people lose everything before they even realize what they had. Mora's decline continued, but it wasn't the kind you see in movies. No epic breakdowns or courtroom confessions. Just a slow, quiet unraveling. Like watching a balloon lose air, not with a bang, but a long, sad hiss. Jonas didn't visit her again after that spring break. She's still blaming everyone else. He told me over the phone one night. She didn't even ask about school. Just wanted to know if I'd testify for her if the investigation went public. He didn't even sound angry when he said it. Just tired. By summer, Mora's house was up for sale. I wasn't sure whether she listed it or if the bank did, but the photos popped up in my real estate app under foreclosures and distressed listings. Seeing pictures of the place, our old living room, the kitchen we remodeled together, Jonas's childhood bedroom, emptied and colorless hit me in a strange way. Not sadness, not nostalgia, relief. That chapter was over. As for the investigation, it wasn't dramatic like Mora probably feared, but it wasn't quiet either. The startup she dumped Jonas's fund into had completely collapsed. The feds were charging the founder with wire fraud and securities violations. Mora, listed as an angel investor, was subpoenaed to testify and produce records of her involvement. I found out from Valerie that Mora had failed to disclose her use of our joint credit lines and Jonas's 529 funds in several official documents. That was considered misrepresentation. The consequences wouldn't be jail time, but they'd be enough: financial penalties, audits, and a red flag on every credit application and job background check for years. Her name was now linked to a public case. Not infamous enough to make national news, but enough to burn every professional bridge she had left. One of her last remaining siblings, Clint, called me again. This time, the message was more pleading. "She's losing everything, Cal. Maybe just talk to her. For closure." I didn't respond, because I already had closure. So did Jonas. That summer, Jonas got a call from the financial aid office at Duke. Based on the new financial hardship on file under parental contribution, he qualified for additional aid. It was one of those small, poetic twists in life. You get burned by someone, but the fire clears the way for something better. He also got invited to speak on a panel for first-year students about financial literacy and independence. He didn't even tell me until afterward. "I just said what you used to say," he shrugged. "About always having your own screwdrivers, even if someone else says they've got tools." I laughed harder at that than I had in months. Meanwhile, I'd settled comfortably into my life in Bon Air. The little rental house had turned into something of a sanctuary. I built a small workshop out back where I could tinker with wood projects on the weekends. Birdhouses, coffee tables, the occasional custom shelf for neighbors. May and I kept seeing each other. Slowly. She respected the space I needed. Never pushed. Never made me feel like I owed her anything more than honesty. One warm evening in early fall, Jonas came home for a weekend visit. We grilled out back, shared a few quiet beers. Well, I had beers, he had soda, and sat under the string lights I'd strung up between the trees. He was taller now, shoulders broader. Still the same quiet stare when he was thinking. Out of nowhere, he said, "You know what I remember?" I looked at him. "You told me once, a man protects his house. But more importantly, he teaches his son how to protect his own." I didn't remember saying that, but it sounded like me. "You did protect me," he said, "even when you didn't know what she was doing." I looked over at him, and for the first time since all of it began, since Mora drained that account, since the family dinners turned into war zones, since the silence settled, I felt something new. Pride. Not just in Jonas. In myself. For not retaliating with cruelty. For not trying to destroy Mora. For just surviving, rebuilding, and showing my son how to do the same. That was the real revenge. Not watching Mora's life fall apart, but thriving in the space she tried to control. Living freely, fully, with peace she couldn't buy or sabotage. A few weeks later, I got a manila envelope from Valerie. The divorce was finalized. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small note. "It's done." She contested the 529 misappropriation claim until the very end. "The court ruled in your favor. You're clear. She owes you restitution, but good luck ever seeing it. Call me if you want to frame the order. I'll pay for the frame myself." I didn't frame it, but I did pin it to the corkboard in my workshop, right next to Jonas's first acceptance letter. Mora moved out of state not long after. Rumor had it she was trying to start over in Arizona. Good for her, I guess. Jonas never mentioned her again. He was too busy living. He spent that next summer studying abroad, then landed an internship with a cybersecurity firm in DC. And me? I finally slept without flinching at shadows. I woke up without dread. I went a full year without even thinking about Mora's voice, until someone mentioned her name in passing, and I had to remind myself who they were talking about. That's how I knew the story was truly over. No fire, no fury, no vengeance, just peace. And that's the sweetest revenge of all.